You're listening to the Future Money podcast presented by the Interledger Foundation, where we invite people from all backgrounds and disciplines to imagine what a financially inclusive future might look like. I'm Lawil Karama, and today we have a big announcement. We're thrilled to announce the new host of the Future Money podcast, Kokayi Walker. Welcome, Kokayi.
Hey, thank you.
Kokayi is a longtime community member of ours from the Ground for the Web times, but also from the Interledger Foundation. He was a previous ambassador for the Ground for the Web and a co-program creator of the Future Money Grant program. And he was the first guest on the Future Money podcast. On today's episode, he and I discuss the evolving landscape of digital finance and the power of design in driving meaningful change. Stay tuned for a peek at what lies ahead for the Future Money podcasts. I mean, Kokayi got me my job, basically. That's like, that's what I told my friends. He asked if I wanted to be a Ground for the Web ambassador. Then through that, the Interledger invited me or asked me if I wanted to become a program officer.
And then she said, should I become a program officer? And I was like, yeah.
So Kokayi, can you tell our listeners a bit more about your journey with the Interledger Foundation and how you first became involved in digital financial inclusion?
So a friend of mine introduced me to one of the few African-American women at Coil, Gala. And Coil at the time was the digital wallet maker or Grant for the Web. And she was like, hey, we need some different opinions and some different perspectives. And she tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, I want to introduce you to Chris, who at the time was a program manager. And I tapped in with him and, it was more Grant for the Web then. And it was about experimentation with the protocol, but in terms of wallets and equity and autonomy and not having to jump through the hoops in the systems. And so that resonated with me. Being a musician, for the past 30-something years, I know what record deals and I know what bad deals look like. And I also know what, being an independent looks like, true independent, right? Having to sell things by yourself and do things for yourself. And technology has always been important for me in terms of music. I've had to learn how to record myself and build studios and learn new equipment and new ways to finance my career. So it just made sense. And then they just needed to know different types of people. So they were like, we don't know these types of communities. What type of communities could you introduce us to? And for me, I'm all about, I tell Chris all the time, we got to solve for X, right? X being the unknown, X being the thing that we aren't really thinking about. And so when we talk about technology and we talk about finance and we talk about communities that are marginalized or underserved or not thought about or, not in the conversations when we talk about finance, then I was like, oh, I'm definitely your person. And then I was like, I like to find cool people. In my life as a musician, I always run across weird, cool people. I mean, some people are not weird, but some people are really weird and really cool at the same time. And so I'm just
That's true.
Let me find the coolest, weird people that I can find that have these different types of voices that aren't America-centric, that aren't, cisgendered white males, that aren't, everybody black everywhere, but a nice mix of people coming from all over the place with different ideas.
And who inspired you the most? And were there any community-driven initiatives?
There's several. A lot of the people who were in the first cohort of grants that I started to introduce people to were all the people that I thought were the good, weird people. So they introduced me to Snake Nation, and Snake Nation was a grantee with Grant for the Web. They're a tech organization and consortium. That's how I know Lawil through Snake Nation. But I had known Carl, who runs Snake Nation, for years. He used to be in D.C. He was in D.C. going to school for a while. Then he was in Atlanta. But I'd known him for years. Tabby Bonet, who was a hip-hop artist, but his father was Itati Bonet, who was a Afrobeat artist before Afrobeat was a thing, from Togo. And Tabby had a farm. And he had, all these goods, and he wanted to do ethical farming. And I was like, yo, that's dope. That's something that I really would like to see supported. And then my friend Carolyn Malachi, who is also an artist, she's over at Howard University. And during the pandemic, she was trying to figure out ways to monetize hand claps from audiences because she felt like that was the thing that was missing.
Okay.
So she wanted to take the claps and the amount of applause would move the meter higher, and that would allow them to send you a specific sort of fund. Like the noise of the applause correlated to the amount of money that would be sent to you.
And that would be put on a digital platform or social media?
A digital platform, and you put it out there whenever you would do a live concert. So through the live concert, because what was missing? There's no audience for the artist, right? They're performing into cameras and they rarely get the feedback. So what would happen is if the person clapped on their end, it would send you a specific amount of funds through the web to your digital wallet.
That's genius. I mean, I don't know how to clap and hold my phone, but like I was like,
well, I mean, if you were sitting in front of your laptop watching a performance,
yeah,
and the person finished, you would start clapping, right? And your microphone would pick up on that noise, and the noise of your applause would elevate the meter as you see it, whenever you're looking at a Zoom screen, and that would correlate through some algorithm that she was developing to elicit a specific amount of funding to the person. So that the artist would not miss out on the applause that they were used to getting because nobody was outside performing. So they would get both the visceral feeling from the people clapping and then the monetary equivalent through their digital wallet.
I would love to see that develop, to be honest. Still.
Me too. I just thought it was great experimentation. I thought a lot of things, there were magazines that we were working with. There were, different communities that we were trying to, stand up. There were smaller like Castapod. I remember when Castapod and all those folks first came into the picture, when, all of these communities that were thinking about the world in a very different way, pre-pandemic, right? And then during the pandemic, it just kind of exploded because we realized that we can do all of these other things like spatial audio happening in these, two-dimensional environments on the web. I remember doing a demo with Soul in the Horn where we went into a space that they created, and the closer your icon got to the stage, the louder the music would be. And if your icon turned to the left, you would hear it, hear the music in your speaker. So you were actually feeling like you were in this concerted environment, and then people could join. And then in order to have conversations directly, you would have to face your little person. Your avatar would have to face the person to hear them head on. So, I mean, it was all of these interesting things that my crazy brain wanted to see happen. I was like, ooh, if we can imagine it, then let's do it.
So what do you believe in that time was a big misconception about the work or the projects that you selected or engaged with?
I feel like there was a lot of disconnect between, like, all of these things are experimental, but how many of these things could turn around and be practical for different communities, for different subsections of individuals, different groups that may not have the specific access? Because again, a lot of these projects started off from a space of privilege, right? Who has a laptop? Who has headphones? Who has a camera? Who has stable internet? Who has stable power? Right. We know about the blackouts in South Africa, that happened, rolling blackouts that happened in Puerto Rico, but we're not talking about, we don't say the same thing when we talk about the Netherlands. And we don't say the same thing when we talk about Texas or DC or California or New York. We don't talk about rolling blackouts. Right. So the assumption is that all of these things are fine. The presumption and the privilege that we operate from are, no, we have all of these things. They're stable. I'm on my internet because I paid the bill. Right. And my internet is just going to work. And if I have a bad connection, I can just walk across the street or use my phone as a tether. These are, again, all the assumptions. So I think that was one side. The other side was the interconnectivity that didn't exist, which is, where were the wallets, right?
Okay,
How are we going to connect these technologies to these wallets? And the wallets were in different countries. And the wallets had different regulations. And we weren't ready for the amount of regulation versus the imagination of what this thing could do. Even still, like with web monetization, we still have to deal with
a lot.
Right. We still have to deal with stable nodes and, all of those things. And if they don't exist, like, we're talking about these things like, oh no, it can happen tomorrow. Well, nah, not really. Right. Experimentation is great and we should absolutely do that. But I also feel like the parity is, if we standing up the things that we imagine in, we also have to stand up the things that can be realized immediately.
Because you're touching on very important premises right now, especially about financial inclusion or digital financial inclusion. And that's kind of like about the people who have been traditionally been excluded due to, what you mentioned, the internet connection,
right,
or even having, access to certain forms of other utilities. So how do you believe that inclusive design can shape, or design in general can shape financial services?
Because we believe that access equals equity a lot of times. And access is not necessarily equity. And when we design projects, again, we have these assumptions. And we don't design from zero.
Yeah.
And we don't design from a space of how do we include these things in the thing before we start, right? If you go to IKEA, right? Just let's use IKEA. When you go to IKEA and get a piece of furniture, what's in the box, right? Everything is in the box. The instructions are in the box. The tool that you need is in the box. The only thing that's not in the box is a Braille copy of the instructions, where someone who is physically unable will be able to feel it, right? Because we're designing for people to be able to use it, anybody. So if anybody's supposed to be able to use it, where's the Braille instructions that shows me how to put this together?
But then they would have you can hire the service to have it.
You can hire this, right? But now you got it. So, but that again, right? If we're talking about design, why am I paying for this extra service? I don't need this extra service. I'm supposed to be able to go to IKEA and buy this piece of furniture and put it together myself, but I don't have any Braille instructions, right? So I feel like what people would think is an insignificant thing to do, but I think that's kind of important if we're talking about design.
Yeah, but the hardest thing with design, because you mentioned you started with designing from your own lived experience, is that if you're stuck within your own lived experience, you can never step out of it unless you have a lot of empathy or imagination.
Exactly. And I think that's why we have these collaborators. I mean, that's what I really loved about the ambassadorship, is that you need to have these other voices in the room that can poke holes in your theories. You have been exposed. We have all been subject to our own environments, right? I grew up a specific way, socialized a specific way. You grew up, and we've talked about this before, right? Like, I have friends in Finland, they don't do small talk. Like, they're just like, small, what are you doing? Like, what are we talking? What do you mean? How's the day? What do you mean?
It makes us uncomfortable.
Right. It makes you uncomfortable, right? So it's like, what do you mean small? We don't do small talk. America's full of small talk. Hey, what's in there? How's the coffee? Like, we do all of that stuff where other people don't do that. But if I was super sensitive to that and wasn't empathetic, right, I would feel like you're being aggressive, or I would feel like it would be off-putting, because I'm not even open to the idea that culturally we're different. I mean, and specifically, let's take our example. We are two brown people, black people, people of color from the continent, right? We're from the diaspora. But we are not culturally, though. If I'm not sensitive and I haven't been anywhere and I haven't talked to anyone, I could assume that we're the same and we're going to react the same to everything. But I would be totally wrong. Now, if I was super sensitive, then I would be like, oh, well, I don't think we're alike, Lawil. What's going on? We look alike, but we're not alike. And it's like, no, we're very much alike. I just have to be open to the cultural nuances and differences that we have based on how we were socialized, based on the cultures that we grew up in. And then that way we could collaborate in a far more effective way that would resonate further because we have these empathies. And I feel like good design does that. Good design says, hold up, I know we should be in the same financial bracket, right?
Yeah.
We could have all of these things in common, right? But do we? That's the other side of the question, is do we have them in common? And if we don't have them in common, let's discuss them prior to me making anything. Let's talk about, how is the financial system set up in your country? This is what it is. Okay. Well, this is how it's set up here. So if I'm going to design this, I have to design it for both of our experiences, or as close as possible. You're not going to catch everything, but as close as possible to limit the barriers of entry, to limit the amount of things that we take for granted because of our privilege, to lessen the chasm between the have and the have-nots. We have to talk about equity in a real way and not just believe that just because you have access that you're automatically going to know. I remember in the very beginning of Grant for the Web, there was a company, I think there was one tech company that was allowing people to build and host websites for free. You could log in, you could build it, and you could host it for free. And we were talking about it, and I was like, man, this sounds really great. Except who knows the programming language?
Oh, yeah. That's the thing, of course.
I can build it and host it for free, but if I can go to Wix and pay $10.99, I don't have to know the language. So here's the barrier of entry, right? I could do it for free. I just got to know the program language. Well, how am I supposed to know that? It's not
Yeah.
being taught in school. It's not something we talk about. We don't walk around in program language every day. Like it's our second language like that. We're not doing that. So what is a free web hosting web thing going to do for me if I don't know the language to even build the website? Again, access doesn't necessarily mean equity.
No, I agree, completely agree with it. And you kind of like already mentioned a couple of things that we are overlooking. But I do feel at times as if I almost want to say it's a Ferris wheel. Like it's the same thing we're going through, just continues and continues.
I mean, but that's technology. I mean, I was thinking about this before we started talking. I was like, wow, what are the things that are redundant? You know, I've had so many conversations. Remember NFTs? Let's just talk about.
Oh, Lord.
Right, exactly, right? I mean, but I still have friends that create in the NFT space. They still
really?
create NFT. Yeah. They got tokens. I know people still rocking with Bitcoin that, you know, one of my friends does fake rares and he does all the stuff around the rare thing. And then I have a friend that's still minting and creating music through there and art, you know.
So there is a market. It just shrunk.
There's still a market. It's just that the market is now not for the hype beasts. Right? For those persons who jumped in when you could sell a token for $2.6 million in Bitcoin and then run away with your money, right? So Beeple is still doing this thing and selling art, but his art is transferred from NFTs to now he's doing art in galleries. It's being sold at Sotheby's. But Beeple made all his money in the beginning through NFTs. So we were still talking about like, you know, man, this is, you know, somebody was telling me about doing royalties through NFTs for music royalties. And I was like, wow, that's cool, but that's redundant. There's already something that exists that does royalties. If you go register with a PRO, you can just get your royalties. Why do I need an NFT for that?
What did he answer?
He could and he couldn't. He was just like, there's still a zeitgeist, there's still an ecosystem for people who don't want centralized anything, right? And they want to make sure it exists on the blockchain so it's transparent and it's decentralized. And I get that. But the problem that you have with technology and anything else, with technology or anything else in the world is what makes it redundant. What makes it redundant? I don't need to necessarily buy a ticket through an NFT. Like I remember when they were talking about NFTs could be great for ticketing solutions. I was like, how? There's so many ticket sellers out here for live shows, for events or whatever. Like you're not going to get rid of tickets. It's just not going to happen. No matter how you want to track it. And it didn't happen because certain things can't be redundant for society if we want to push it forward. And so that's how I look at Grant for the Web. That's how I look at Interledger Foundation. That's how I look at any technologies. Is like, what are we doing that's not going to be redundant? If we're doing something that's redundant, there's no need to, I mean, we can build it if we want to, but is it going to be redundant?
What I find so difficult about that part is quite often once you build something, especially if you think about certain innovative products, is that sometimes people are not sure if it has a breakthrough or not.
That's true.
So I could think like with NFTs, that's an entire other conversation, but I could have thought like, okay, I don't really need it or it's not a necessity, but it still breaks through a market and changes that landscape. And that's what I find quite difficult about. It's not a guess, but you need to have a belief that your product will work or your ideation.
Yes. I concur 100% that there's certain things that still need to be made because they're not going to exist if they're not made.
Yeah.
Right? Even if they're redundant. Redundancy doesn't mean not improving on the product. That's what I'm saying. You know, there's a widget. You can still create a better widget. We got mad apps, right?
Yeah.
But which app is better than the other app? They both serve the same thing. If we talk about finance, you talk about Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, right? That's the US versions. You got mobile banking that you can do. But then there's like other product, like, and just to keep it a buck, like in the United States, most of our apps are proprietary. I can't pay you to your Venmo through my Cash App.
That's something like from a Dutch perspective, it doesn't make sense at all.
Because you can send money to anywhere, right?
Yeah, to any bank and anywhere. I mean, if it goes abroad, I have to think about router numbers and I don't completely understand that process if I have to do it.
Right.
But like in the Netherlands, I can send money to any bank and it will be there within 1 second. And I do not have to pay a fee.
Right. But can you send it to any mobile app?
I can, yes.
There we go. Because what is the mobile app that is mostly used in the Netherlands?
So because we have a very strong, I always call it a highly saturated market, all of our banks have digital wallets.
Oh, okay, cool.
So we don't really need a mobile app or something. I mean, people used to use, if you didn't have a credit card, you would use PayPal, and then we would have Ideal. So you would upload a certain amount of money on that. Or if you have a credit card, then it doesn't really matter because you can use anything. Then I send with remittances, we have certain apps that we can use as well. There is a fee on there, usually around €2. But then you can send it from Eden to the African continent, and then it will arrive immediately as well. And they can pick up the money through their mobile money account. So it's actually, it's very quick and easy.
And then in Africa, there's apps that just work with everybody. You can just tap your phone. Same thing in China. In China, you can just tap your phone. So I could tap my phone to your phone and I could pay you.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
In certain markets, you can just use your face.
Yeah, I saw that there was this WeChat thing going on with your hand. I didn't like it, but that's...
Yeah, I mean... But what I'm saying is, some of us, the technology is like but because we're so regulated, or due to capitalism, we're just not going to open that system up. We're not going to, our thing is proprietary, your thing is proprietary. We'll just see who has the better app, right? And I think that's the thing that, yes, it's innovative, right? But is it going to drive scarcity? Or is it going to drive innovation? Is it going to drive abundance? Is it going to drive the idea or concept of floating all boats? And when you work in specific types of societies, the idea is not to float all boats. It's to float my boat.
Yeah. What I find difficult about it, especially if I look at the United States, is kind of like the fact that that there are still a lot of people who are underserved or underbanked. And that fragmentation within the market and not giving them the proper opportunities. And quite often it also has to do with regionality and everything, but not providing them the proper opportunity to be able to participate. But then also the reversal, because I don't completely understand your credit system either, but that's more of a fact that taking on debt, I don't understand how that can be the reason to have a good credit score. Because for us, it's the reversal. For us, it's saying, okay, if you have a lot of debt, that means you have a very bad credit score and you should not be able to take out more. So I don't understand that system and that narrative that's being driven, because it's not focused, and that's probably just capitalism, but it's not focused on creating a society based on the premises of a form of inclusivity or equality as well.
The other thing is, it doesn't take into account the diverse and different types of informal economies that exist, right? So here we have given circles. Down south, they call it the susu, right? And the susu is a communal thing. But I feel like that has African origins, where there's communities, like if everybody doesn't have, those of us who do have throw into the pot for those who don't have, right? And so if we go back to the credit situation, America runs on credit. I mean, it runs on debt also, right? We run in a deficit. That's just what it is. They run in a deficit because as long as we owe, that means somebody got to keep making the money. That means we can keep borrowing money to keep doing, right? And the credit score thing is about what they call good debt and bad debt. And I'm like, there's no such thing. There's no such, it's all debt. Like, it's all debt.
For me, it doesn't make sense at all. It's like the worst thing I've ever heard about.
Right. But it's also a form of, indentured servitude.
I never thought about that one.
Unfortunately, we had a system here that operated on slavery, and the country was built with free labor, right? And so when they outlawed the free labor situation, they had to figure out ways to get around it. So if you're in prison, which is why you found a lot of Black people getting imprisoned right after the Civil Rights Act and the voting laws and all of these other things, because once you're imprisoned, then I can take those rights away from you and you can go back to creating products for me for less than 2 cents a day. Like, you get paid as a prisoner, technically paid, but you're not getting minimum wage, right? So then you have this indentured servitude. So if I have a company that I owe $2,000 to the IRS or whatever, and I get a chance to pay it back and the interest rate is 79,000%, I'm just going to keep owing forever. And I can keep working forever. I can work forever and I can owe forever. And then I'm just, supporting whatever corporation or entity for the rest of my life.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Those communities that are underserved and underbanked often have been, I would say, taken advantage of, and because of the trust that has been lost in these communities, because of the things that have been done to those communities. There was a Black Wall Street that got burned down because people didn't like that it was prosperous. Just to keep it a buck. They could say it was something different, but it was because they were prosperous. And they were doing it on their own, and they were, making money. And other poor people around them didn't like the fact that these Black people had money. And so they burnt it down. There's a lot of distrust that has been sowed into different communities. It's distrust between poor communities to keep you struggling and at bay. And without collective economics, like if you talk about cooperative economics, which is one of the principles of Kwanzaa, Ujamaa, right? If you talk about a collective economy, if you talk about the Susus, if each community got together, because I've seen it happen, there's Filipino communities get together and it's like, look, we're going to buy this house. We all going to work. We're all going to contribute to the pot until we buy this other house. And now we have 2 pieces of land and we're just going to keep going. And I got a Muslim friend from Sudan, and his family is like, yo, are you contributing to the family pot? Like, you got to have enough money to contribute to the pot. And if our cousin over there needs a house, we're just going to pay for the house so they don't owe. Because, culturally, we don't believe in debt. We don't believe in charging interest on a loan. So what we're going to do is we're going to collectively go over there and do that. And so in a way, we do pool our money together. We just might not trust the banking systems that have historically, during the Great Depression, Black people who had their money in banks couldn't get their money out.
Okay.
During some of the uprisings, the bank was like, nah, you can't get your money or your property. If you read the history of the United States, when they had the Japanese concentration camps, right, which they called internment camps because of the war that was happening, farmers who had farms, their white neighbors who weren't growing as many strawberries, and this was in California. This is not on foreign soil. This is not in Japan. This is in California. They were a prosperous farm, but when they were sent away to the internment camp, they came back home, the neighbor living on their farm. They can't get their farm back. I mean, they got paid reparations a little.
Yeah, but what is that compared to?
But that still ain't my farm.
Yeah.
That's not a legacy of wealth building that has been promised to every American. But you could take that, copy and paste that to any other culture where, colonization has happened.
I mean, there's so many examples if I think about it.
Exactly. Globally.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think these systems exist, throughout multiple countries, but I feel like, in order to make it an equitable thing, we have to create the systems to speak to that inequity.
Since I don't want to, I mean, I'm not that old yet, but I'm a little bit older. I want to say, sorry. I was like guessing our ages and I was like, I can't say it this way.
You can say it. You can say it however you want to say it.
Since we're part of an older generation, what advice would you give young people? Because we talked about all of these legacy systems and the barriers that we need to.
You got to build the next thing. You got to build the next thing. You got to design with empathy. I mean, it's all the stuff that we talked about from the beginning. Yeah. You got to design with empathy. You got to design with, the ideas of other people, like not centering yourself. To me, that's the thing. If you want to fix
that's a sacrifice.
That's a super sacrifice because you're not centering your own lived experience. You got to take, I mean, I look at it like if you were doing any sort of cultural diplomacy. Let's take money out of the picture. Let's just fully take money out of the picture. If I was trying to do any type of cultural diplomacy and say, hey, you know what? I really think that you would thrive in this space or thrive in this society or really like to come visit my home, right? I wouldn't be like, come visit my home, take off your shoes or don't take off your shoes or, come in here, but you can only shake my left hand and don't do this and don't. If I told you all these don't things, without considering where you come from. Like in your house, do you come in the house and take off your shoes? Like I couldn't come to your house and not take off my shoes if you took off your shoes.
Yeah, that's a common thing.
Right. I can't come to I wouldn't just walk into your house with my street shoes on and just be like, blah, blah, traipsing around in your house. Right. I would have to practice some sort of, understanding and taking the context clues. Like if I walked to your door and I saw that there were 30 pairs of shoes by the door, I would probably think that maybe I should take my shoes off. That would be the assumption is like, there are shoes by the door.
Or ask at least.
Or ask, right? Yeah. But I'm looking, right? But I think the important part is as individuals who are thinking individuals, like let's take asking out of just look.
Yeah.
If you just paid attention, spatial awareness, cultural awareness, if we just paid attention and walked into a house, I would look. I wouldn't even need to ask you anything. I'd be like, hey, what's up? And you'd be like, hey. I would look down and I would notice that you have on socks or house shoes. I would look by the door and see that you have shoes by the door. And then I would immediately say, I need to take off my shoes because I'm looking and paying attention, because I have the empathy of the person's home that I'm about to enter. So in a design aspect, as we design for the future, we need to think about whose home are we trying to enter and what are the rules of their home. And if we're trying to look at their home, how are we trying to help not fix their home, right? I'm not here as a savior. I'm not trying to fix your home. Like, I want to be able to enhance your opportunity and my opportunity. I want to make it a great visit.
Yeah.
How can I come and make it a great visit? And how can I assist in making sure that my visit is great, right? Did I bring you some food when I came? Did I ask you dietary restrictions? You know, should I bring something? Like, before you invited me and I said, all right, should I bring some wine? Should I bring something to drink? And then you would tell me that, and then I would observe the rules in your house. And I think that's how we should approach anything that we're creating. It's like, what do you have and what do I have? Or what don't you have and what don't I have that I could try to solve? And what's X? What's X in this equation that I want to solve for?
But I also think it's very important to create more awareness, because I realized through a conversation I had with one of our ambassadors, Xiaoji Song, she actually mentioned that through all of the activists she meets and the conversations that she's had, she realized that a lot of issues people are dealing with within society, if it's like feminist rights or if you think about labor rights or migrant rights, that all ends up within the financial system or sector. So she's like, I feel like we should have more conversations about what it means to be able to participate in a financial system. And then we're thinking about how can we engage with young people to create the awareness about systematic effects.
Right. We got to learn before we start building anything. We got to learn to listen and find out what's happening before we build anything. And then when we talk about these things, what's the historical, we got to have context. So what's the historical context behind everything that's happening? Because it's just not happening because you didn't have the information, right? We can all have the information, but there's another thing that's in the way. Financial inequity is not a glitch. It's not something that just like, oh, it just happened and it got mixed up and messed up. Like, there's some things that are systemic, and there's some things that are systemic on purpose. And you can't separate your activism from what you're trying to do a lot of times, because you're trying to create a better future. So don't bury yourself. Everything is not dystopian. Everything is not utopian.
Yeah, there's a
balance. There's a balance of it. And I feel like we go into it with an open mind, but we also try to collect as much information as possible and not talk too much.
Very good point. So I have another question, because we're kind of like talked slightly about the future, and also because you are the designer of the Future Money Grant program. What is your imagination for the future?
I just hope that, I just look for more information for people to be able to have access. For me, I think the biggest thing is, how do I educate? We live in a world of skeptics and a plethora of information. Some of the information is not accurate information. And so you have a lot of people running around collecting money for seminars and get rich quick schemes and, all of these, how to subvert the government and how to, get $40 million in 2 days and don't have to pay for it because the tax on, like, you got all of these experts, right? And for me, the future that I would like is real information being given to people so that they can be able to build something that can last for multiple generations. And that's on the onus on the person is to like get that information so they have correct information, and that for the future, we have this correct information to be able to access. Then I think on the technical side, we have the actual products that actually do what they said they're going to do, right? That don't have these barriers to entry, that are designed so that the braille is in the package, right? So that when you get this thing in the mail, you're able to set it up no matter your station in life. No matter if you got, 2 cents to your name or 20 million cents to your name, that you're able to start off on some specific sort of leveled space. in terms of what you know. I don't imagine a future where everybody has the same amount of money. Unfortunately, we live in a world where those things matter way more than people. And I'm not Debbie Downer at all. I believe in humanity.
No,
I
but
love
it's
humanity.
true. But it's
But
still
it's just that that's the way the systems are. It's a system, right? But for me, for the future, I'm just like, as long as we can make that system fair at the onset, so that everybody who walks into the game is not ridden, they're not carrying the debt of their mother or father or their family. They're not carrying the weight or the inaccessibility based on caste, because that's a whole other thing to talk about, right? That their caste doesn't matter, that their race doesn't matter, that their political ideations doesn't matter, that their, sexual orientation doesn't matter, that their ability or able-bodiedness doesn't matter, that those things are all fair in the beginning, and that they have equitable access and resources in the beginning. If that's there, I feel like that's a far better future to build on. And that the tools and things are really going to be based on the amount of information that you use and the amount of sweat equity that you put into the thing. And for those who can't do that, I feel like there should be systems to undergird them as well.
No, it makes sense, because if you're running a race, if everybody has the equal start.
If everybody's running a race and has an equal start, the person with minus one leg still has to have another leg. Like, where's that leg at? And if we can't give them another leg, but this is what we'll do. We'll be like, everybody has an equal start. And be like, right, but they don't have a leg. And we'll be like, right, that's not my fault.
No, but I think what you just said, we can have the compassion to give them the equal start.
To give somebody the other leg, right. We know that it's not, you don't have the leg, so we'll give you the other leg, but we're still all going to start with these two legs. We're all going to be able to see. We're all going to be able to, we have the same shoes, right? We had the same trainer. I mean, I'm glad we use this metaphor, because that's the whole thing. It's not just the shoes. It's not just the body. It's do you have the right training? Were you in the right facility? Did they train you to go up hills? Are you in the right atmosphere and the climate? Are we racing at the top of a mountain? Are we racing 900 feet below sea level? All of those things are added into the race. But what we assume is, well, you got two legs and some shoes.
For me, if I think about it, it's almost as if it needs a cultural change.
Yeah.
Because you need to let go of what we've built currently and how we think as a society about things. And that's what I find difficult about it.
We assume that it's a race, and the race has able-bodied people in the beginning, and everybody is the same, and everybody's not the same.
Yeah.
We can say that everybody's the same. Everybody's not the same. The training for a runner coming from Kazakhstan is not the training for a runner coming from Ethiopia, from Addis specifically, right? Because in Addis, they way above sea level. The whole conditioning is very different. It's just the topography of the country is different. So of course there's going to be a different type of lung span and stride, everything, because it's already different in the beginning. It's not the same thing. So cultural sensitivity is enough to understand that it's not the same and be okay with it not being the same. Yeah, and understanding that we have to help people to get to the space where it is the same.
So as you take over as host, what conversations, I know, what conversation excites you the most? Have you kind of like a thought about?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, I love what the podcast has been, and thank you so much for all of the interesting people that you brought, and thank you for the intention and the sensitivity and awareness that you brought to the conversations. I love that. If I could say be a co-host, but I know those are other things. But anyway, but yeah, I feel like I'm just going to continue the legacy of having those conversations. I feel like, though, when we talk about the future of money, we got to talk about people's past. And I want to tell more stories. I want to tell more stories. I think the compassion part starts with a lot of stories. It's like, let me know about your life. Like, I want to talk about the technology, but I also want to be like, yo, what was your life like? We're all shaped and formed by our experiences. So what was the experience that made you go down this path? And I feel like there's an interest in that. There's an interest in that, and there's a through line in that. And we can, talk to one another in a way that's far more compassionate. And that's where you can find the compassion and cultural similarities in people, is when you start finding about their past. We talk about the present, and then we talk about what they imagine for the future, not just for technology, but beyond, like personally, what they imagine for the future. And I think that's, what we can do as we think about how we want to approach this. Because it's also the future of society. It's not just the future of money, it's the future of society.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
how we
Yes.
deal with us in respect to money and outside of that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much for being part of the Future Money podcast and taking over as a host.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Interledger Foundation. I'm looking forward to building this thing with everybody and making it something fun and informative and groundbreaking. Yeah.
Thank you, listeners, for being part of the Future Money podcast. It's been an incredible journey hosting and sharing these conversations with you. I'll be stepping away as host. Yeah, I know. Sad news. But the podcast is entering an exciting new chapter with my colleague Kokayi Issa. He will be taking the reins and bringing you a fresh iteration of Future Money, with new perspectives, new voices, and the same commitment to exploring the future of digital financial inclusion. So make sure to stay subscribed on Castapod, Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you listen to your pods, so you won't miss what's coming next. Bye!